There is a pattern running underneath every decision you make, underneath every relationship you choose, underneath every reaction you have before you've had time to think. You didn't design this pattern. You didn't choose it. And most people never even know it's there. But the people who understand it, who can read it in themselves and in others, they move through the world differently. Not because they're smarter, because they're paying attention to something most people walk right past. Today, we are going to decode 10 of these patterns, 10 behavioral tendencies so deeply embedded in human psychology that once you see them, you cannot unsee them. These are not theories. These are documented, replicated findings from decades of behavioral science research. And by the end of this video, you will be able to predict human behavior, including your own, with a level of accuracy that will genuinely surprise you. If that sounds like something you've been waiting to understand, subscribe before we go any further. Let's get into it. Pattern 1. The confirmation trap here is something that will make you uncomfortable if you sit with it long enough. Your brain is not designed to find the truth. It is designed to find evidence that confirms what it already believes. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, and it is one of the most powerful and most dangerous patterns in all of human behavior. When you form a belief about a person, about a situation, about yourself, your brain immediately begins filtering incoming information. Evidence that supports the belief gets noticed, remembered, and emphasized. Evidence that contradicts the belief gets overlooked, forgotten, or explained away. This is not something you do consciously. It happens below awareness, automatically, constantly. The practical consequence of this is enormous. It means that two people can look at exactly the same situation and come away with completely different conclusions, each absolutely certain they saw it clearly. It means that the longer you hold a belief, the more entrenched it becomes, because every day, your brain has been quietly collecting evidence in its favor and discarding evidence against it. It also means that the people most confident in their beliefs are often the people most blinded by them. Certainty and accuracy are not the same thing. Confidence is not the same as correctness. And the pattern that generates the most certainty confirmation bias is the same pattern that keeps people most locked inside whatever they already believe. What breaks it? Deliberate exposure to contradictory information, not passive exposure deliberate. Actively seeking out the strongest argument against what you currently believe, and taking it seriously enough to actually engage with it. Most people never do this. The ones who do develop a quality of thinking that is genuinely rare. If you already recognized yourself in that description, hit the like button right now, because the next 9 patterns are going to hit even closer to home. Pattern 2. The loss aversion asymmetry. If I offered you a coin flip heads, you win $100. Tails, you lose $100. Most people would refuse that bet. The math is perfectly neutral. The expected value is exactly 0. But psychologically, the prospect of losing $100 feels roughly twice as painful as the prospect of gaining $100 feels good. This is loss aversion, one of the most replicated findings in behavioral economics and psychology, and its implications extend far beyond gambling. Loss aversion explains why people stay in bad jobs, bad relationships, and bad situations long past the point where logic would suggest leaving. The pain of losing what they already have, even something mediocre, feels more urgent and more real than the potential gain of something better. It explains why people hold on to losing investments waiting for them to recover. Why they keep objects they never use, because getting rid of them feels like losing something. Why they resist change even when the current situation is objectively worse than the alternative. Understanding loss aversion doesn't eliminate it. The feeling is real, and it runs deep. But naming it gives you something critical. A moment of pause between the feeling and the decision. The next time you feel a strong resistance to change or to letting something go, ask yourself, am I making this decision based on genuine assessment, or am I being driven by the fear of loss? The answer, more often than you might expect, will be the second one. Pattern 3. The social proof mechanism in 1969. A simple experiment revealed something disturbing about human behavior. Researchers filled a room with smoke while subjects were completing a questionnaire. When subjects were alone, almost everyone left the room within a few minutes to report the smoke. But when the room also contained actors who calmly continued working and ignored the smoke, the real subjects followed their lead, sitting in an increasingly smoky room, doing nothing for up to 20 minutes. This is social proof in its most visceral form. When we are uncertain about what to do, we look to what other people are doing and treat it as information about what the correct action is. The more uncertain we feel, and the more similar the people around us seem to be to ourselves, the more powerful this effect becomes. Social proof is why restaurant owners put lines outside their doors, why bestseller lists drive book sales regardless of quality, why laughter tracks on television make jokes seem funnier, why a product with 10,000 reviews feels safer than one with 10, even when you haven't read a single review. The most important thing to understand about social proof is that it is not stupidity. It is, in most circumstances, a rational shortcut. When you don't have enough information to make a confident decision independently, the collective behavior of other people is genuinely useful data. The problem is when this shortcut gets applied in situations where the crowd is wrong, where everyone is doing the same thing, not because it's correct, but because everyone else is doing it. The ability to distinguish between situations where social proof is useful information and situations where it is a trap is one of the rarest and most valuable cognitive skills a person can develop. Pattern 4. The peak end rule. In the 1990s, psychologist Daniel Kahneman conducted a study involving patients undergoing a painful medical procedure. Some patients experienced the procedure for a short duration with consistent pain. Others experienced the procedure for a longer duration, but the pain gradually decreased toward the end. When patients were asked to rate how unpleasant the overall experience had been, the group who suffered longer but ended with less pain rated the experience as less unpleasant than the group who suffered less but ended at peak pain. This is the peak end rule. Human beings do not evaluate experiences by averaging the total of what they felt. They evaluate experiences primarily based on two moments: the most intense moment, pa, and the final moment, the end. Everything in between gets dramatically underweighted. The implications of this are profound. It means that how an experience ends matters more than how most of it went. A vacation that ends with a flight delay and lost luggage will be remembered more negatively than its content deserves. A difficult conversation that ends with genuine understanding will be remembered more positively than the discomfort of most of it suggests. It means that the way you end things, relationships, projects, meetings, even individual conversations, disproportionately shapes how those things are remembered and how the people involved feel about them. And it means that your memory of your own life is not an accurate recording of your experience. It is a selective construction, weighted toward intensity and endings, with vast stretches of ordinary experience quietly filtered out. Pattern 5. The spotlight effect. You spill something on your shirt before an important meeting. For the rest of the day, you are acutely aware of the stain. You assume everyone you talk to notices it and is forming opinions about it. You replay the moment of the spill. You wonder what impression you're making. And meanwhile, the people you're talking to have almost certainly not noticed. And if they have, they've already forgotten. This is the spotlight effect, a persistent human tendency to overestimate how much other people notice and think about us. We experience ourselves from the inside, with full access to every flaw, every awkward moment, every mistake. We assume others are paying the same quality of attention to us from the outside. They are not. They are too busy experiencing themselves from the inside, with full access to their own flaws and awkward moments and mistakes. The spotlight effect drives an enormous amount of social anxiety, self-consciousness, and avoidance behavior. People don't speak up in meetings because they're certain everyone will notice if they say something wrong. They don't try new things because they're certain everyone will notice if they fail. They carry embarrassments for days or weeks because they're certain others are still thinking about them. Understanding that the spotlight is largely imaginary doesn't eliminate self-consciousness, but it does give you permission to act more freely. The audience you've been performing for, in most situations, is paying far less attention than you think. And that is, once you sit with it, genuinely liberating. If this is landing for you right now, subscribe before we go into the next 5. The second half of this list is where it gets really interesting. Pattern 6. The Chameleon Effect in a research study. Subjects were asked to interact with a confederate who was instructed to either mimic the subject's posture, gestures, and mannerisms, or deliberately avoid doing so. Subjects who were mimicked reported liking their conversation partner significantly more, without any awareness that they had been mimicked. This is the chameleon effect. Human beings automatically and unconsciously mirror the behavior of people they interact with. And being mirrored back makes people feel more connected, more understood, and more positively disposed toward the person doing the mirroring. The effect happens below conscious awareness on both sides. The mirroring is not calculated. The positive response is not deliberate. Both emerge from the same underlying social bonding mechanism. The chameleon effect explains why certain people seem to effortlessly connect with everyone they meet. They are not necessarily doing anything consciously. Their natural tendency toward behavioral mirroring is simply stronger, and the people they mirror respond to it without knowing why. It also means that you are being influenced by the people around you in ways you cannot directly observe. The postures, the energy levels, the emotional states of the people in your environment are being absorbed and mirrored by your own nervous system, constantly, below the level of awareness. You are not a sealed unit moving through a neutral environment. You are a permeable system, continuously shaped by the behavioral field you're embedded in. Pattern 7. The Self-Fulfilling Prophecy in 1968. Researchers Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson told elementary school teachers that certain students had been identified by testing as being on the verge of significant intellectual growth. These students, the teachers were told, could be expected to bloom academically over the coming year. The students had actually been selected at random. But by the end of the year, the students who had been labeled as bloomers showed significantly greater gains in IQ than their classmates. The teachers' expectations had changed how they interacted with those students in ways subtle enough that neither the teachers nor the students were fully aware of them. More encouragement, more patience, more challenging material. And those subtle behavioral shifts produced real, measurable cognitive gains in the children. The self-fulfilling prophecy works in both directions. Positive expectations, communicated through behavior, tend to produce positive outcomes. Negative expectations tend to produce negative ones. And the most powerful version of this effect is the one you run on yourself. What you believe about your own capabilities shapes how you approach challenges, which shapes the results you get, which confirms what you believed. If you believe you are someone who can figure difficult things out, you persist through difficulty longer, you seek resources more actively, you interpret setbacks as information rather than verdicts, and that persistence and active seeking produces outcomes that confirm the original belief. Your beliefs about yourself are not just descriptions. They are instructions. Pattern 8. The sunk cost fallacy. You've been in a restaurant for 45 minutes waiting for your food. The food is taking too long. You're not enjoying yourself. But you've already been there 45 minutes, so you stay. You're watching a movie that isn't good. You're 40 minutes in. But you've already watched 40 minutes, so you keep watching. You're in a job, or a relationship, or a course of action that isn't working. But you've already put in so much time, so much energy, so much money, so you keep going. This is the sunk cost fallacy. The tendency to continue investing in something because of what has already been invested, rather than because of what future investment will actually produce. The invested resources are gone regardless of what you decide next. They are, in economic terms, sunk. They cannot be recovered. They should not influence decisions about the future. But they do. Powerfully, consistently, across virtually all human beings in virtually all circumstances. The reason the sunk cost fallacy is so persistent is that cutting losses feels like admitting failure. It feels like the time and energy and money that went before was wasted. But here is the reframe that changes everything. The resources were spent whether you continue or not. The only question is whether you add more resources to a situation that isn't working, or whether you redirect those resources towards something that might. The most honest question to ask is not how much have I already put in, but if I were starting from zero today, would I choose this? If the answer is no, the past investment is not a reason to stay. Pattern 9. The reciprocity reflex. In virtually every human culture ever studied, there exists a powerful social norm. If someone gives you something, you feel obligated to give something back. This is the reciprocity principle, and it operates with an almost reflexive automaticity that bypasses conscious reasoning. In one famous study, a researcher sent Christmas cards to complete strangers. The strangers, knowing nothing about who had sent the cards, felt compelled to send cards back. In another, a waiter leaving a small mint with the bill received significantly higher tips, not because of the monetary value of the mint, but because of the social dynamic the gift created. The reciprocity reflex is one of the foundations of human cooperation. It makes sustained exchange possible, and it makes social trust possible. Without it, many of the structures of human society would not function. But it is also one of the most reliably exploited patterns in human psychology. Free samples in stores trigger reciprocity. Unsolicited favors create obligation. Small gifts precede large requests because the small gift changes the psychological landscape of the interaction. Understanding reciprocity gives you something important: the ability to distinguish between genuine generosity and strategic generosity. Not to become cynical about all kindness, most generosity is real, but to recognize that the feeling of obligation that follows being given something is a reflex, not a verdict. You are not automatically required to fulfill every obligation that reciprocity creates. You can acknowledge the feeling without being controlled by it. Pattern 10. The narrative bias. Human beings are not primarily rational animals. We are storytelling animals. And the most fundamental pattern in all of human behavior may be this: we do not experience reality directly. We experience the story we tell ourselves about reality. When disconnected events happen to us, we don't file them away as a random sequence. We connect them into a narrative with causes and effects, protagonists and antagonists, themes and meanings. We need the events of our lives to make sense as a story, and we will bend our interpretation of events to fit the narrative we already have about ourselves and the world before we will abandon the narrative. This is why the same objective event, losing a job, ending a relationship, being passed over for a promotion, can devastate one person and galvanize another. The facts are identical. The stories are not. One person's narrative makes this event evidence that they are failing, that the world is against them, that the future is foreclosed. Another person's narrative makes the same event evidence that they were in the wrong place, that this is a redirection, that the future is open. The story is not decoration. The story is the experience. And because the story is constructed, actively built by a mind that is selecting, emphasizing, interpreting, connecting, it can, with effort and intention, be rebuilt. Not easily, and not by simply deciding to think positively. The narrative bias is too deep for that. But by deliberately examining the evidence that your current story is built on, questioning the interpretations you've treated as facts, and exploring alternative narratives that fit the same events, it is possible, over time, to write a story about yourself and your life that is both more accurate and more useful than the one you've been living inside. Closing 10 patterns. 10 ways the human mind runs on autopilot beneath the level of conscious awareness. The confirmation trap. The loss aversion asymmetry. The social proof mechanism. The peak end rule. The spotlight effect. The chameleon effect. The self-fulfilling prophecy. The sunk cost fallacy. The reciprocity reflex. And the narrative bias. These patterns are not flaws to be ashamed of. They are features of the human cognitive architecture. They exist because, in the environments where they developed, they worked. The problem is not that we have them. The problem is when we run them unconsciously, without awareness, without the ability to recognize when they're leading us somewhere we don't want to go. Awareness is not a cure. Knowing about confirmation bias doesn't make you immune to it, but awareness is the prerequisite for everything else. You cannot work with a pattern you can't see. You cannot override an autopilot you don't know is running. The goal is not to become someone who has no patterns. The goal is to become someone who knows which patterns are running, when they're running, and whether they're serving you or driving you somewhere you never consciously chose to go. If this video helped you see even one of these patterns more clearly in your own life, hit that like button right now. It tells me this kind of content is landing, and it helps this channel reach more people who are running these patterns without knowing it. Drop in the comments which of these 10 patterns you recognized most strongly in yourself. I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because next week we go even deeper into the hidden architecture of human behavior, and you do not want to miss what's coming. Until then, watch the patterns. You'll start seeing them everywhere.